At 7:42 on March 6, 1945, Corporal Clarence Smoyer crouched behind the gun sight inside the turret of an M26 Pershing tank, its steel hull wedged between mountains of rubble in the shattered streets of Cologne, Germany. 2 blocks ahead, a German Panther rolled into view. Smoyer was 21 years old. He had spent 7 months in combat across France and Germany. He had already destroyed 5 enemy tanks. But nothing in his war had prepared him for what he was about to see. The Panther's turret rotated smoothly. Its 75mm gun aligned with the intersection where 2 American Shermans had just halted. The Panther fired. The first round punched straight through the lead Sherman's gun shield. The second round followed less than a second later, nearly through the same hole. Inside the Sherman, 3 American crewmen were killed instantly. The tank commander tried to bail out. His left leg was already gone below the knee. He collapsed beside the burning hull. Smoyer watched smoke billow from the crew compartment 2 streets away. He had grown up in Pineville, Pennsylvania, in coal country. His father worked underground. Smoyer had never been in a fist fight. He had gone hunting once, shot a rabbit, and felt sick afterward. Now he sat behind the gun of the most powerful tank America had ever fielded, staring at a German machine that had just erased a Sherman as if it were made of tin. By March 1945, the U.S. Army had lost thousands of Shermans to German armor. The math had never favored the Americans. A Panther outweighed a Sherman by nearly 10 tons. A Tiger weighed even more. German 75mm and 88mm guns could penetrate Sherman armor at ranges where American 75mm rounds simply bounced off. During the Battle of the Bulge, 3 months earlier, American tank battalions had been devastated. Entire companies lost half their vehicles in a single engagement. Crew survival rates told the real story. If your Sherman was hit, you had seconds to escape before ammunition cooked off, turning 33 tons of steel into a crematorium. The problem had been obvious since Normandy. The solution had been delayed for 3 years. Army Ground Forces Command, led by Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, insisted the Sherman was adequate. Tank destroyers would handle enemy armor. American doctrine said tanks supported infantry and avoided tank versus tank combat. German doctrine said otherwise. So did the battlefield. The Ordnance Department had designed a heavy tank as early as 1942. The T-26 program produced multiple prototypes. Each version added armor, improved the gun, refined the suspension. Each version also added weight and complexity. McNair's staff rejected every proposal. The Sherman worked in North Africa, they argued. Why fix what wasn't broken? By 1944, that argument was killing American tankers. The Ardennes offensive changed everything. In December 1944, more than 400 German tanks, including Panthers and Tiger IIs, smashed into American lines. Sherman crews fought bravely and died quickly. After the Bulge, no one could pretend the Sherman was sufficient. In January 1945, the first 20 T-26 E3 heavy tanks, now officially designated M26 Pershings, arrived at the Belgian port of Antwerp. General Omar Bradley split them between 2 veteran divisions, 10 to the 3rd Armored Division, 10 to the 9th Armored. They reached a maintenance depot near Aachen on February 17th. Division commanders handpicked their best crews for the new machines. The Pershing felt familiar, but heavier. The transmission was different. The suspension stiffer. Each crew fired 28 rounds to qualify on the 90mm main gun. The blast was enormous. The recoil slammed through the turret. Even through intercom headsets, the noise left ears ringing. Smoyer remembered his first test shot vividly. A farmhouse stood more than 1,200 yards downrange. Major General Maurice Rose, commander of the 3rd Armored Division, stood 20 feet behind the tank with his staff. Rose ordered the target, the farmhouse chimney. Smoyer centered the reticle and fired. The muzzle blast knocked Rose and every officer behind the tank flat on their backs. The chimney vanished in a cloud of brick and dust. Rose stood up, brushed off his uniform, and grinned. Smoyer destroyed 2 more chimneys at longer range. Rose approved the Pershing for combat on the spot. By February 25th, the first Pershings entered combat near the Roer River. One was knocked out the next day by a concealed Tiger. Others destroyed German armor at ranges where Shermans would have been helpless. By early March, the 3rd Armored Division was pushing toward the Rhine. Cologne lay directly in their path. Germany's fourth-largest city, once home to over 1 million people, was now a smoking ruin. 262 Allied bombing raids had reduced it to shattered stone and twisted steel. Only the twin spires of Cologne Cathedral still stood, rising above the wreckage like tombstones. On the morning of March 6th, Smoyer's crew received their orders. They would lead the advance into the city center. Their Pershing, one of only 20 in all of Europe, would be first through every intersection, first to draw fire, first to find hidden guns. General Rose had chosen them personally. It was meant to be an honor. Smoyer touched the small Bible in his breast pocket as the streets narrowed into shadow. At 8 o'clock, the Pershing lurched forward. Staff Sergeant Robert Early commanded from the turret. Corporal John DeRiggi loaded the 90mm shells. Private Homer Davis manned the bow machine gun. Private William McVeigh drove. Smoyer sat at the gun. They had been a crew since September 1944, fighting through Normandy hedgerows and Ardennes snow in a Sherman. 3 weeks earlier, they had received the Pershing. They named her Eagle 7, after the Philadelphia Eagles. Cologne's streets had become stone canyons. Collapsed apartment blocks filled roadways. Tram rails twisted skyward like vines. Every intersection offered a dozen firing positions. Every basement window could hide an 88mm gun. German defenders used the city itself as a weapon. Basements connected through underground pedestrian tunnels, mouse trails. German infantry appeared behind American lines, attacked, and vanished underground. Snipers fired from church towers and factory smokestacks. Anti-tank crews waited until vehicles passed, then fired into thin rear armor. The Pershing's advantages were real, but limited. 4 inches of frontal armor. A gun that could kill any German tank. But in city fighting, distance vanished. A Panzerfaust fired from 20 feet did not care how thick your armor was. Molotov cocktails dropped from third-story windows landed on engine decks. At 46 tons, the Pershing strained Cologne's infrastructure. Bridges that Shermans crossed easily became death traps. Streets that lighter tanks navigated turned into rubble-filled cul-de-sacs. Smoyer watched through his periscope as Eagle 7 rolled past the ruins of a shopping district. Mannequins lay scattered among bricks and glass. A streetcar sat overturned, windows blown out. The smell, smoke, dust, and worse, crept through the ventilation system. Every 40 yards, Eagle 7 stopped. McVeigh checked for mines. Rubble could hide explosives. Shell craters could snap a track. The radio crackled. Shermans cleared side streets. Infantry moved building to building. Resistance seemed lighter than expected. Most Wehrmacht units had withdrawn across the Rhine during the night. The bridges were wired with explosives. Only rearguard volunteers remained west of the river, men who had sworn to fight to the last round. Eagle 7 rounded a corner onto a broad avenue. Ahead, the twin spires of Cologne Cathedral loomed through smoke, less than half a mile away. Every map reference began there. Every radio call used the spires as a landmark. The Pershing advanced another block, then another. The streets widened. And with that, the danger increased. Wide avenues meant long sight lines. And somewhere ahead, a German Panther was already waiting. Long sight lines favored the Germans. Corporal Clarence Smoyer kept his right eye pressed into the rubber cup of the gun's sight, scanning windows, doorways, and shattered storefronts. His right hand rested on the turret traverse control. His left hovered near the firing trigger. Every shadow looked like a firing position. Every dark window could hide a Panzerfaust. At 9:15, the radio crackled. German armor had been confirmed near Cathedral Square. At least 2 Panthers, possibly a Tiger. American infantry units had attempted to advance and been forced back under machine gun and mortar fire. They were pinned down less than 3 blocks from the cathedral. Eagle 7 was ordered forward. Smoyer swallowed hard. The Pershing had never faced a Panther in direct urban combat. Every man in the turret knew the numbers by heart. The Panther's 75mm gun could punch through 6 inches of armor at 1,000 yards. Its frontal armor was nearly 5 inches thick, sloped for maximum deflection. In Normandy, single Panthers had wiped out entire American platoons. McVeigh eased the Pershing forward. The engine growled low as they entered the cathedral district. The streets narrowed again. Buildings that still stood rose 4 and 5 stories high, forming stone corridors where sunlight barely reached the pavement. Smoke from smoldering fires drifted between the ruins, hanging low and thick. McVeigh slowed the tank to walking speed. The 46-ton Pershing made less noise at low throttle, but the steel tracks still echoed off brick and stone. Sound carried far in ruined cities. Smoyer rotated the turret left, then right, methodically covering alley mouths and storefronts. The 90mm gun swept across doorways like a searchlight. This had once been Cologne's commercial district, department stores, cafes, offices. Now it was a maze of rubble and shadow where every basement window could conceal an anti-tank team. The radio transmitted in clipped bursts. 2 companies of American infantry were pinned down east of the cathedral. Machine guns from multiple positions. Mortar rounds falling with precision. No Sherman could reach them. The side streets were choked with debris. Only the broad avenue Eagle 7 was following remained passable. Another message cut in. 2 Shermans from F Company had attempted to reconnoiter the square from the north. They were operating without infantry support, dangerous in city fighting, but riflemen were tied down elsewhere. The Shermans had orders to identify enemy positions, then withdraw. Early acknowledged. Eagle 7 would link up with them near the cathedral. 3 American tanks might be enough to suppress German fire long enough for infantry to move. The Pershing rolled past a burned-out German half-track. Its crew lay nearby, killed by machine gun fire sometime during the night. Beyond it, the street opened into a small plaza. A stone fountain sat in the center, dry and shattered. The avenue continued straight toward the cathedral spires. At 9:47, Smoyer heard it. 2 heavy booms. Tank gunfire. Then a third. The sharp, unmistakable crack thump of high-velocity rounds striking armor echoed through the streets. Moments later, the radio erupted. An F Company Sherman had been hit. Crew bailing out. Another Sherman taking fire. Enemy tank position unknown, but extremely close. Panther operating near the cathedral. The transmission warned. Early's voice came over the intercom. Steady, controlled. Eagle 7 would continue forward. They were the only American tank in position to engage. The Shermans were likely destroyed or disabled. Infantry could not advance while a German tank controlled the square. The mission was unchanged. Find the Panther. Kill it. McVeigh shifted gears. The Pershing accelerated slightly, still slow by open field standards, but faster than their cautious crawl. Speed meant noise. Noise meant the Germans would hear them coming. But speed also meant less time exposed. Urban combat was always a gamble. Smoyer checked the ready rack. 6 rounds within reach. 3 armor-piercing, 3 high-explosive. Derrick had stacked additional rounds around the turret, organized and ready. Against a Panther, the fight would be brief. Either Eagle 7 destroyed it in the first exchange, or Eagle 7 died. The avenue curved slightly left. Beyond the bend lay Cathedral Square. Somewhere in that open ground, or in the streets feeding into it, a German Panther crew waited. They had already killed American tankers. They knew more were coming. Smoyer tightened his grip. Eagle 7 rounded the curve at 15 miles per hour. Tracks clanked over broken pavement. Exhaust streamed from the rear grills. The twin spires of Cologne Cathedral filled the vision blocks. The square came into view at 9:52. Once a grand public space, it was now a cratered expanse nearly 300 yards across. Rubble, shell holes, and burned vehicles scarred the stone. Beyond the cathedral, the Hohenzollern Bridge spanned the Rhine, its trusses heavy with demolition charges. German engineers waited for the order to drop it. Smoke drifted across the plaza. Through the haze, Smoyer spotted the first Sherman. It sat motionless in a side street feeding into the square, angled awkwardly as if it had stopped suddenly. Smoke poured from the open commander's hatch. The gun tube pointed skyward at a useless angle. McVeigh halted Eagle 7 one block short of the square, sheltering in the shadow of a partially collapsed office building. From here, they could observe without exposing themselves. Early studied the scene through his vision blocks. The Sherman had been hit at least twice, probably within seconds. Clean, professional gunnery. The German crew knew exactly what they were doing. The second Sherman was not visible. Radio reports placed it somewhere on the northern edge of the square, also disabled. That meant the German tank had overlapping fields of fire. Any American vehicle entering the square would be engaged immediately. Early made his decision. He would reconnoiter on foot. Leaving the Pershing stationary was dangerous, but advancing blind into a prepared ambush was worse. Early climbed out of the turret hatch and dropped into the street. A man emerged from a doorway 30 yards ahead. Technical Sergeant Jim Bates, U.S. Army Signal Corps. Bates carried a 16mm film camera, his rucksack heavy with film magazines. He had been documenting the 3rd Armored Division since Normandy, combat footage destined for American newsreels. Bates had been filming with an infantry squad when the first Sherman was hit. He had captured the Panther's muzzle flash. The impact, the crew trying and failing to escape. Now, with an American heavy tank in Cologne, Bates wanted more. A Pershing versus a Panther in the heart of Germany was history unfolding in front of him. Early and Bates moved together along the building wall, hugging cover. They reached the corner overlooking Cathedral Square. Early leaned out slightly, scanning the plaza. Somewhere ahead, the Panther was waiting, and the next seconds would decide which tank and which crew would leave the square alive. From the corner overlooking Cathedral Square, Early saw it. Partially concealed by a side street, the Panther sat in a textbook ambush position. Its long 75mm gun pointed straight down the avenue where the Shermans had advanced moments earlier. The barrel extended from the angular turret like an accusing finger aimed at a killing ground already soaked in blood. The German crew had chosen well. From that position, the Panther commanded the square while remaining half-hidden behind rubble and masonry. Any American tank approaching from the north would expose its thinner side armor before it could bring its gun to bear. Early studied the geometry carefully. The Panther could not see Eagle 7. A collapsed building blocked the German line of sight. As long as the Pershing remained in shadow, it was invisible. But the moment Eagle 7 entered the square, the Germans would spot it instantly. A frontal duel across 300 yards of open ground would be a gamble. Both guns could penetrate each other at that range. Whoever fired first would likely win. But Early saw another option. A narrow side street ran parallel to Eagle 7's avenue. If the Pershing looped around the block, it could enter the square from the west. The Panther's gun faced north. To engage a target from the west, its turret would have to rotate. Turret rotation took time. Not much, 3 or 4 seconds, but enough. Enough for one shot. Early returned to Eagle 7 and climbed back into the turret. Over the intercom, he laid out the plan in calm, precise terms. They would advance down the parallel street. At the final intersection nearest the cathedral, they would turn left into the square. The Panther would be to their right, roughly 90 degrees off the Pershing's gun axis. Smoyer would have a clear shot at the Panther's side armor. The thinnest armor. The killing shot. McVeigh acknowledged immediately. Derrick slid an armor-piercing round into position. Davis readied the bow machine gun. Smoyer rotated the turret until the main gun pointed right, anticipating the angle they would need the instant they cleared the corner. The Pershing's engine growled. 46 tons of steel began to move. Across the square, Jim Bates climbed to a second-story window overlooking the Cathedral Plaza. He braced his 16mm camera against the frame and began filming. If history was about to unfold, he intended to capture it. Eagle 7 entered the side street at 9:58. The street was barely wide enough for the Pershing's bulk. Broken masonry and shattered storefronts crowded the pavement. McVeigh threaded the tank between craters, maintaining a steady speed. Too slow, and they would be easy targets. Too fast, and Smoyer couldn't aim. Ahead, the intersection appeared through McVeigh's vision blocks. Beyond it lay Cathedral Square. Smoyer pressed his eye into the gun sight. His finger rested lightly on the trigger. The turret was already traversed 90 degrees to the right. When they cleared the corner, the Panther should appear directly in his sight picture. Combat rarely went exactly as planned. 50 yards. 40. 30. The Pershing's engine noise echoed through the narrow street. The Panther crew would hear them before seeing them, but sound was deceptive in ruined cities. Direction was hard to judge. Echoes bounced unpredictably. Seconds mattered. At 20 yards, Eagle 7's bow emerged into the intersection. McVeigh caught sight of the Panther immediately. It sat exactly where Early had predicted, about 110 yards away. Close range. Point blank for a 90mm gun. But the Panther's turret was already moving. The long barrel was swinging toward them. Someone inside the German tank had reacted faster than expected. McVeigh made a split-second decision. He did not stop. Stopping would make Eagle 7 a stationary target. A stationary tank was a dead tank. Instead, he gunned the throttle. The Pershing lurched forward into the intersection, crossing the Panther's line of fire. Smoyer saw the Panther fill his sight. Angular turret, long barrel, black muzzle swinging toward him. Every instinct screamed that he was staring down the barrel of a gun that could kill him in a heartbeat. Training took over. American tanks were not meant to fire on the move. The gun was not stabilized. Accuracy suffered, but stopping meant death. Smoyer compensated instinctively, led the target a fraction, and squeezed the trigger. At 9:59 and 12 seconds, the 90mm gun fired. The armor-piercing round crossed 110 yards in a fraction of a second and struck the Panther's turret face just below the gun mantlet. Even through smoke and muzzle flash, the impact was unmistakable. Sparks exploded outward. Inside the turret, steel spalled violently, turning fragments of armor into lethal shrapnel. Inside the Panther, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bartelborth tried to understand what he was seeing. The tank that had burst into the intersection was too low, too angular to be a Sherman. For a split second, the impossible crossed his mind. Was it German? The hesitation lasted less than half a second. Then the impact came. McVeigh brought Eagle 7 to a halt in the center of the intersection. Fully exposed. No cover. But now Smoyer could aim perfectly. Derg was already moving. The breech snapped open. He slammed another armor-piercing round home and locked it. Smoyer never lifted his eye from the sight. The first hit had been solid, but not fatal. He adjusted his aim downward. Side armor. Below the turret ring. The Panther's side armor measured 40 millimeters, half the thickness of its front. The 90mm gun would tear through it. At 9:59 and 17 seconds, Smoyer fired again. The second round punched through the Panther's right side, ripped across the fighting compartment, and burst out the opposite armor plate. Inside, systems failed instantly. Hydraulics ruptured. Ammunition ignited. Bartelborth threw open his hatch and jumped, hitting the pavement behind the tank. 3 crewmen followed, scrambling clear as smoke poured from the engine deck. One man did not escape. Smoyer fired a third time at 9:59 and 23 seconds. The round struck low on the turret near the ring. Fire erupted immediately, fed by burning hydraulic fluid and leaking fuel. Within seconds, the Panther was engulfed. From the second-story window, Jim Bates kept filming. The entire fight, captured frame by frame. The Pershing entering the intersection. The Panther's turret rotating. The muzzle flashes. The impacts. The crew bailing out. 45 seconds from first shot to burning wreck. Smoyer leaned back from the gun sight. His hands shook. The Panther was destroyed. Eagle 7 was intact. Every man in the crew was alive. The Pershing had proven itself. The Panther burned for hours. Ammunition cooked off inside the hull, sending sparks and fragments into the air. By noon, the turret sat warped and blackened, frozen at an unnatural angle. German infantry supporting the tank withdrew across the Rhine. Without armor, their position was untenable. By early afternoon, American troops moved into Cathedral Square. Bates climbed down and approached Eagle 7. He filmed the crew standing beside the tank, smoking cigarettes, checking for damage. They had taken no hits. The Panther had never fired. Bartelborth's hesitation and Eagle 7's speed had decided the fight. At 1400 hours, American engineers began checking the Hohenzollern Bridge for demolition charges. Infantry cleared surrounding buildings methodically. Resistance was fading, but Cologne was not finished. German strongpoints still existed east of the cathedral. Eagle 7 received new orders. The crew remounted. McVeigh started the engine. The Pershing rolled deeper into the shattered city. At 1432, Eagle 7 entered a narrow street several blocks from the cathedral. Buildings closed in on both sides. The corridor was barely wider than the tank itself, and the war was not done with them yet. Ahead, the street opened into a small intersection. Beyond it, the route sloped gently toward the Rhine riverbank, where the last German units west of the river were retreating or preparing demolition charges on the remaining bridges. Suddenly, a black automobile burst from a side street, racing across the intersection at full speed. It weaved violently between piles of rubble, its suspension bouncing as it tore over shattered pavement. To Smoyer, it looked like a staff car. German officers used similar vehicles to move between command posts, especially in the final days of the war when radios were unreliable and headquarters shifted constantly. In urban combat, any unidentified vehicle was a threat. Civilians had been evacuated weeks earlier. Anyone still moving through Cologne during daylight was assumed to be a combatant or directly supporting the German defense. Smoyer did not hesitate. He squeezed the trigger on the coaxial machine gun. Tracer rounds streaked across the intersection in bright, snapping lines. Several struck the car's body panels. Glass shattered outward in a spray of fragments. But the vehicle did not stop. It continued across the intersection, fishtailed once, and disappeared down another street. At the same instant, a second set of tracers cut in from the left. From a concealed position behind a partially collapsed building, a German Panzer IV opened fire, its machine gun hammering the same target. The German crew had also spotted the automobile and engaged it simultaneously. The combined fire was devastating. The car lurched violently and skidded to a stop against a curb. The driver slumped forward over the steering wheel. A passenger door flew open. A figure tumbled out onto the street and did not move. Smoyer's eyes snapped left. He saw the muzzle flash. A Panzer IV, older model, likely an OSF, sat tucked behind the ruined building. Not as dangerous as the Panther they had just destroyed, but still lethal. Its long 75mm gun could easily destroy a Sherman. Against a Pershing, the odds favored Eagle 7, but only if they could get a shot. The Panzer IV began to withdraw, backing deeper behind the collapsed structure. Smoyer could see only part of the gun mantlet, not enough to guarantee a kill. The German tank vanished completely behind the rubble. McVeigh tried to maneuver Eagle 7 for a better angle, but the street was too narrow. The Pershing's bulk filled the roadway. There was no room to pivot or flank. The building hiding the German tank had once been a 4-story residential block. Its front facade had collapsed outward, but the rear portion still stood. Interior walls were exposed through the breach. The Panzer IV was somewhere inside. Repositioning. Waiting. Smoyer made a decision. He couldn't see the tank, but he could see the building. He traversed the turret until the 90mm gun pointed at the base of the standing wall section. Derrick had already loaded a high-explosive round, designed to destroy fortifications. Smoyer aimed for the corner support, where the wall's load-bearing strength was concentrated. At 14:34 and 48 seconds, he fired. The high-explosive shell slammed into brick and concrete. The blast tore a 6-foot section out of the corner support. For a moment, nothing happened. Then gravity took over. Without the support, the entire wall section destabilized. For stories of masonry and timber collapsed inward in a roaring cascade. Beams snapped. Stone shattered. Tons of debris crashed down, burying the space where the Panzer IV had been concealed. The sound echoed through the street like thunder. Dust rolled outward in thick clouds, blotting out the intersection. When the dust settled, the building was gone. In its place stood a jagged mountain of broken stone and twisted steel. Somewhere beneath that pile, a German tank lay entombed. Inside, 18-year-old machine gunner Gustav Schaefer and his commander had only seconds to react. They clawed their way out through the turret hatch as rubble continued to fall. Dust choked the air, making it hard to breathe. They scrambled over shattered masonry and fled into the ruins before Eagle 7 could fire again. The rest of the crew escaped moments later through other hatches. By nightfall, all 4 would cross the Rhine and surrender to American military police. Eagle 7 continued operations in Cologne for 2 more days. By March 8th, the city fell completely to American forces. Engineers secured the Hohenzollern Bridge before German demolition teams could destroy it, though other bridges across the Rhine had already been blown. Above the devastation, Cologne Cathedral still stood, its Gothic spires rising unbroken through smoke and ruin. Jim Bates' footage of the Panther engagement reached newsreel editors within a week. By late March, it appeared in American movie theaters. Smoyer's sister saw it in a cinema in Pennsylvania. She recognized her brother instantly and brought their parents back the next day to watch again. The 3rd Armored Division did not pause. By March 10th, they were advancing east beyond the Rhine, pushing deeper into Germany. Some towns surrendered without resistance. Others required brutal house-to-house fighting. The Wehrmacht was collapsing, but fanatics and SS units continued to fight to the end. On March 30th, Major General Maurice Rose was killed south of Paderborn when his jeep encountered German Tiger tanks. He was shot at close range, the highest-ranking American officer killed by enemy fire in the European theater. Smoyer's unit helped recover Rose's body the next day. The loss hit the division hard. Rose had led from the front. He had taken the same risks as his men. The war ground on. Germany surrendered on May 7th. Victory in Europe followed the next day. Smoyer remained in Germany through the summer as part of the occupation force. Eagle 7 was shipped back to the United States for evaluation. Engineers cataloged every dent, every weld, every mark on the Pershing's armor. In September 1945, Smoyer came home. He returned to Pennsylvania, married, raised a family, worked quietly, and rarely spoke about the war. But the war never left him. At night, he dreamed of Cologne, of the cathedral spires, of the Panther burning in the square, and of a black automobile racing through an intersection, caught between American and German guns, of the figure that fell from the passenger door and never moved. For nearly 7 decades, Clarence Smoyer carried that moment with him. He never knew who she was. He never knew whose bullets killed her. And that uncertainty haunted him for the rest of his life. Clarence Smoyer knew only one thing with certainty. She was dead, and he had pulled the trigger. For decades, that knowledge lived beneath the surface of his civilian life, quiet but persistent. At night, it surfaced without warning. Melba would wake to the sound of him shouting, his arms swinging at enemies only he could see. Sometimes he would roll out of bed before he was fully awake, fighting shadows that belonged to another city, another time. The memories did not fade with age. They sharpened. The years passed. Life continued, but the anchors that held him in the present slowly disappeared. His son Barry died of a heroin overdose in the 1970s. Melba developed Alzheimer's disease. Eventually, she no longer recognized him. She forgot their home. She forgot their children. In time, she forgot his name. She died in 2017, after 71 years of marriage. By then, the people who had tied Smoyer to civilian life were gone. The war remained. In 1996, at the age of 73, he saw Jim Bates footage of Cologne for the first time. A documentary about the 3rd Armored Division included the duel near the cathedral. Smoyer expected to see the Panther. He expected to see the Pershing. What he did not expect was clarity. The black automobile. The intersecting machine gun fire. The passenger door opening. A body falling. The film showed what memory never had. A woman. Young. Unarmed. Dead. The footage confirmed what Smoyer had feared for half a century. A civilian had been caught in the crossfire. And he had been part of it. The realization did not bring relief. It brought a different need. He wanted to know her name. He wanted to face her family. He wanted to apologize, even if apology meant nothing. In 2013, at the age of 89, Clarence Smoyer returned to Cologne. A German journalist had spent years researching the incident. The woman had a name, Katharina Esser, 26 years old, the youngest of 4 sisters. Unmarried. She had stayed home to care for her parents while her sisters built families of their own. She worked in a grocery store, took night classes, planned a life that never happened. On March 6, 1945, she and her employer attempted to leave the city. They were caught between 2 tanks. The journalist arranged a meeting at her grave. Smoyer arrived expecting to stand alone. Instead, Gustav Schaefer was waiting. The German machine gunner, whose Panzer IV had also fired at the car. The man who had been buried under rubble when Smoyer collapsed the building. The man who had lived with the same memory for nearly 70 years. They were old now. Frail. Strangers bound by the same moment. They met on the steps of Cologne Cathedral. Smoyer extended his hand. Schaefer took it. Together, they walked to the mass grave where Katharina Esser lay among other civilian dead. Neither man knew whose bullets had killed her. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. Urban combat did not allow certainty. What mattered was simpler. They had both fired. They both carried the weight. Schaefer placed yellow roses on the grave. Smoyer knelt to do the same and lost his balance. Schaefer caught him before he fell. 2 men who had once tried to kill each other now held each other upright at the grave of a woman caught between them. They became friends. Letters crossed the Atlantic. Video calls connected Pennsylvania and Germany. They spoke about the war, not as enemies, but as men who had survived it and were still trying to understand it. Schaefer died in 2017. Smoyer sent flowers to the funeral with a note. I will never forget you. Your brother in arms. Clarence. On September 18, 2019, Clarence Smoyer received the Bronze Star with Valor at a ceremony in Washington, D.C. He was 95 years old, the last surviving member of Eagle 7's crew. The other medals were accepted by families. The men who had stood beside him in Cologne were already gone. Clarence Smoyer died on September 30, 2022, in his home in Allentown, Pennsylvania. He was 99 years old. Every year since 2013, yellow roses have appeared on Katharina Esser's grave. Someone remembers. Someone still apologizes. The Panther still burns in old photographs in front of Cologne Cathedral. The Pershing that destroyed it sits in a museum. The film still exists. 45 seconds that changed how America understood armored warfare. But the story was never about tanks. It was about men who went to war because they were ordered to, who killed because they had to, and who spent the rest of their lives trying to make peace with what they had done.